Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea together again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now trying to stone you, and you are going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble, because they see the light of this world. But those who walk at night stumble, because the light is not in them." After saying this, he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will be all right." Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought he was referring merely to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about her brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." And Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out, so they followed her, because they thought that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" And they said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. And Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead 4 days." And Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you would always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end.
In the name of the Lord who sets us free. Amen. Unbind him and let him go. Unbind him and set him free. These are the words that Jesus says after Lazarus exits the tomb. He is raised, but yet to live freely, he needs to be unbound. I think we can hear these same words to us during the season of Lent, as we prepare for the mystery of Easter, the mystery of new life. Jesus is saying to us, unbind yourself. Get yourself ready to be free. Unbind yourself from everything that keeps you from living the life that God intends for you. Unbind yourself. Unbind yourself from fear, from greed, from shame, from anything and everything that says death in your life. Unbind yourself and get ready for Easter. In John's Gospel, the raising of Lazarus is the catalyst that sets Holy Week into motion. We didn't read that far today in the Gospel. We ended with that phrase that many witnessed the raising of Lazarus and they believed. But then it goes on to say that there were some who witnessed the raising of Lazarus and they went immediately to the religious authorities to tell them what they had seen. And then the religious authorities said, okay, this is the last straw. And the paragraph ends there with it saying that from that day on, they planned to put Jesus to death. So we have this funny, interesting exchange here that Lazarus is raised so that Jesus may die, so that Jesus may live, so that we all may live. No wonder Jesus wept. This famous verse from the Bible, if anyone grew up in a Sunday school class where you had to memorize scripture, you know this verse, right? I used it. The shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. Jesus began to weep. And then this is not Jesus cried. This is Jesus wept. The most human moment, perhaps, in all of the Gospels. Why did Jesus weep? Because he was too late? Because he had not gone immediately when he heard that Lazarus was ill? I think that, like most of us, when we cry, when we weep, it's not really just about one thing. It's about many things in our lives. And one of those things, I think, is Jesus' realization that he's caught. He's caught in this situation where to raise Lazarus is to bring about his own death on a cross. In John's Gospel, Jesus knows exactly who he is and what he's about. It's clear from the very beginning. He knows what his ministry is about. So on the one hand of this tragedy, Jesus knows that in him and in his ministry, all of eternity is held. And so that he can say, when Martha comes running out to meet him, he can say to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Though you may die, you will live. He can say, as Paul said to the church in Rome, and as we say at every burial service here at St. Barnabas, whether we live or we die, we are the Lord's. We are held in God's hands in life and in death. Or as St. Julian of Norwich said, all will be well. In all manner of things, all shall be well. On this cosmic level of faith, Jesus knows that whether Lazarus is in the tomb or is out of the tomb, he is held in God's love, and all shall be well. But then Jesus sees Mary. And Mary, he sees that she's moved by this incredible and particular grief for her brother whom she loved. And Jesus, we also know, loved Lazarus. It says it right there in the gospel. And he himself is moved by the human and particular emotion of that moment. So he's caught between the cosmic faith and the particular faith that we're all caught in. And so, in the middle of this dilemma, he does the faithful thing. He acts. Mary says, "Come and see." Jesus cries and then goes and he sees and he says to Lazarus, "Come out and live. Come out of the tomb and live." And then he gives us that instruction on how to live. Unbind him and set him free. Yes, live in the here and the now. Live in this moment with all the particular sorrows and pain of your life, but act and live like you know that whether you live or you die, you belong to God. In other words, live a resurrection life, unbound. So our gospel lesson speaks to us of the faithful, unbound life, the hopeful living of an individual. And our Old Testament lesson from Ezekiel also gives us this image of new life. But instead of speaking to the individual Lazarus or to you or to me, Ezekiel is speaking to a nation. He's speaking as a prophet of God to the nation of Israel. Israel, who at that very moment in their history is at the very lowest point. The Babylonian army has invaded Jerusalem, has destroyed the city, and has sent its inhabitants into exile. Ezekiel, who had been in exile already for 10 years, is taken by God to look at a vision. And the vision is of a valley filled with dry bones. Have you all seen our children's choir perform this song, Dem Bones, Dem Bones? They're so cute. They're pointing to their bones and balancing and tripping over. Put that thought out of your mind for a moment and think about what Ezekiel is really seeing in this situation. He's seeing death, a valley of human remains. And God says to Ezekiel, "Can these bones live?" Now, if I were Ezekiel, I would have been, "No, I don't think so." But God says, yes. Those bones will live. Now, it's a little bit different from what Jesus says to Lazarus, "Be unbound." Here, God is saying, connect. Connect bone to bone. Come together, bone to bone, so that the sinew can grow back, so that God can breathe new life into this body. Can these bones live? Yes, if they can find their way back to connection. Now, God was speaking in the Bible to the nation of Israel, but I think as the United States of America, we might want to hear these prophetic words as well. Can these bones live? Can we find our way back to connection across every difference, wherever you are on the political spectrum? Can these bones live? Yes, if we can find our way back to connection. Bone to bone, let the sinew grow back so that God's breath can be breathed into our common life. That's a prophetic word for us today. So this Lent, we have two invitations for each of us individually to find our way to become unbound from what holds us to death. Unbound from fear, unbound from greed, unbound from shame, so that we then can be free to connect bone to bone, one to another, and be the people that God has created us to be, free in relationship. We can do this because Jesus wept. Jesus came and stood among us in all of our own particular pains and fears. And Jesus said, "I know how you feel." And then he acted. He acted with faithfulness and then called us to go and do likewise. Thanks be to God.